Hello and welcome to the second in our Brown&Co Virtual Farm Walks. My name is Jamie Seaman. I'm a land agent and partner in the Kings Lynn office. This is Ed Blundy, a land agent and partner also in the Kings Lynn office and our head of energy. And this is Lottie Hill, an environmental consultant in our Norwich office. Today we're going to talk to you about natural capital and making the best from your assets on farm. There's lots of schemes currently available, there's more schemes coming in the future, grant funding, it's a big change, there's a buzzword, public money for public goods. And to start with, we're going to ask Lottie to introduce the existing stewardship schemes available.
So one of the most popular ways of getting paid for environmental delivery on the farm is through the Countryside Stewardship Scheme. This has been up and running since 2016 and last applications are due to be in the summer of 2023 starting 2024. There are different levels of schemes that you can apply for. I'm going to quickly give a brief overview of those. So you've got the wildlife offers, which are guaranteed entry schemes. You tend to have to put about 3% of your land into stewardship options. And once you've done that, it's guaranteed and you've got a good income from environmental delivery there. You then, on top of that, got the mid-tier or the higher tier schemes. These are competitive, so there's an element of having to make sure that your application is attractive to get into the scheme. The higher tier tends to concentrate on more unique and specialist habitats such as parkland, fenland, whereas mid-tier is open for all. So all three of the schemes, you have a range of rotational and non-rotational options that you can apply for. Some of the higher rotational options are wild suns such as wild birdseed mix that pays £640 a hectare. There's also opportunities to plant cover crops that pays between £100 and £114 a hectare, kind of going with the emphasis of regenerative farming. Higher paying non-rotational options include in-field grass strips, which aim to combat soil erosion, which pays £557 a hectare, and floristically enhanced margins of plots, which pays £539. And you can kind of come up with a combination of these that suit your farm best. So the stewardship options can be used on a whole farm basis, so in rotation, or they can be used to fill some of the smaller areas on the farm and cut out kind of the awkward corners and marginal bits. When we're looking at putting together applications, and as we have done the past 3 years, the kind of average return of all the options that you're putting in is about £419 a hectare. So it's a good amount depending on the different options that you put in. In spring this year, we have the introduction of the CS Capital Grant Scheme. A kind of independent standalone scheme which you can apply for if you're in a wildlife offer originally, or a HLS scheme, or if you've got no stewardship schemes entirely. It gives you an opportunity to apply for funding for water capital items, hedgerows and boundaries, and as well as air quality, with a cap of £20,000 for each. If you're applying for a mid-tier or a higher tier, you can include these capital items within the scheme, and the cap that you get increases substantially to up to £290,000. So this is really good for putting things in such as hedgerow planting or capital yard infrastructure or concrete yard renewal or those sort of things, which gives you a chance to kind of really look at your farm and see ways that you can improve it from the water quality and kind of for the future.
Okay, well that's very comprehensive, so thank you very much for that rundown of the Countryside Stewardship Scheme. Just staying on the Countryside Stewardship vein, are there any sort of landlord-tenant considerations we should be thinking about, Ed?
I mean, first and foremost, you need to go and check your agreement. Go and find out whether, in the first place, whether or not you're permitted to enter into an agreement. That's the first thing you need to check. The tenancy agreement is everything. It's the holy grail. You need to go and see what it says. If there's a chance that your stewardship agreement might outlive your current tenancy period, so your tenancy is going to end before the stewardship agreement ends, then you might find that your landlord has to countersign or sign a letter of commitment agreeing to step into the shoes of the tenant in the event your tenancy ends before the stewardship agreement, so they commit to take over the scheme rules after the current tenancy in the event it ends.
And that's a really simple form to fill out that tends to be checks that we do with most stewardship applications. If you're an AHA or an FBT and whether we need landlord consent, it's a simple form that we get the landlord to sign, and that can be sent in and we've got documentation of that.
Okay, and what about if you've got different landlords and tenants claiming different schemes at the same time?
Yeah, great point. So dual use, not a dual claim, but a dual use where your tenant might be claiming the BPS on a parcel of land, but the landlord using the same parcel of land for stewardship options. So that needs to be documented as well, but it is permitted. So.
Yeah, definitely permitted.
So Lottie, just one question I do have. Obviously, we're here in High Norfolk, where stewardship is ready-made for it. If I was a tenant farmer of, say, 200 hectares of South Lincolnshire silt, paying £200 an acre rent, does stewardship work for me?
On some areas it might do, but I think it's important to bear in mind that the new elm scheme that's coming up, there are more options going to be available for improving soil health. So rather than taking land out of production, you can get paid to improve what you've already got, and I'll come on to that later. But yeah, it's a good question.
Okay. Well, should we have a walk?
Yeah, sure.
Keep talking. Okay, so moving away from countryside stewardship, we've been reading a serious amount in the press about environmental land management schemes, or ELMs. Could you tell us a bit about those? Obviously, I know the details still quite hazy, but it would be good to get a rundown of what we know to date.
Yeah, so kind of ELMS is the umbrella branch for environmental land management scheme, and that covers 3 schemes. And I'll kind of go into a bit of detail about each one. So the sustainable farming incentive is a kind of open to all. Anyone that's claimed BPS can apply for it. The idea of this one is that you're looking at environmental protection, soil health, climate change resilience. There are different standards that you can apply for across the land. So some might be focusing on resource protection, some might be focusing on woodland. And within those standards, there are kind of 3 levels. So introductory, intermediate and advanced, with the payment rates increasing for each one. That's actually set to open in spring 2022, kind of a drawn back one. And I'll go into some of the details of that in a bit. The next tier up from that is the local nature recovery one, which is a lot more focused on local habitats, local species, and that's going to be informed by the county council, which are currently writing local nature recovery kind of strategy reports. We're more likely to see kind of collaborative approaches with this one, working with neighbours potentially to focus on a particular species such as turtle dove, and the payment rates will kind of hopefully be a little bit higher than that of the SFI going forward. Again, pilots meant to start in 2022 with the scheme up and running in 2024. And then the highest scheme is the landscape scale recovery, which is large scale habitat restoration and creation. You're looking at schemes being put together, a minimum of 500 hectares up to 2,500 hectares, with all the land being contiguous, so it all has to be touching. Again, pilots have started and it'll be up and running in 2024. Now with these, the government are really focusing on irreversible land use change, which might mean that they start introducing some conservation covenants which have been mentioned. I mean, Ed, in terms of once the land's got a conservation covenant on, what kind of considerations does the owner, if they want to go into it or if they want to sell it, what do they need to bear in mind?
Yeah, so with covenants, what the landowner needs to be aware of is that at that landscape recovery scheme level, those commitments that they're undertaking to do will become an entry on their title.
Okay.
So if they want to sell that land or transfer it to a third party or even internally, the covenant will remain on the title, so any future owner of that land will be required to undertake whatever it says on the title. So it's a covenant to ensure that the deliverables of that scheme remain with the land regardless of ownership.
Forever, yeah.
Going forward. So in summary, Lottie, the key is that the covenants ensure that the deliverables of those long-term landscape plans are attached to the land and not the individuals. So if you've sold the land, the covenants stay with it on the title, not with the individual.
Okay, so on the sustainable farming incentive pilot scheme, Lottie, you've obviously made several applications on behalf of clients, and we've talked about some of the standards, but what other standards are there?
So one of the key standards that I think is worth talking about is the arable and horticultural soil standard. So this is one of the standards that you're going to be able to apply for in spring 2022 when the SFI opens kind of in its drawn back one. What's really at the heart of this one is soil health. So in order to be part of it, you need to make sure that you draw up a soil risk assessment. So it's identifying areas on the farm that might be at risk of soil erosion, compactation, runoff, and other issues such as that. There are 3 levels for the scheme. So the introductory level pays £30, the intermediate pays £47, and then the highest one pays £59.
Is that per hectare?
Per hectare, yeah. So, and you can apply it to any of the arable fields that you want included. One of the key elements of it is, once you've kind of identified what's at risk soil-wise, is each year kind of making an indication of what the soil health is going to be by doing assessments. So that can be for soil organic matter and biological indicators such as an earthworm count. And this kind of you have to do on 20% of your land every year and go around the whole estate. They want to look at ways of increasing green cover. So introductory level, that's 5% of the land, going up to 15% in the advance. This green cover can either be cover crops, or it can be making sure that you've got an autumn crop established so the land isn't laying bare. Other ways they're looking at kind of you can get paid for it is increasing your soil organic matter. So this can be through kind of the incorporation of straw, or might be doing like a herbal laydown and within the arable rotation to improve the soil health there. Again, percentages of the land that you need to include increases depending what level you're on. So the introductory level, you're looking at 15% of the land you're increasing the soil organic matter, going up to 25% at the advanced level.
Snipping back for a minute to the example we were talking about in the field earlier about my hypothetical fenland farmer on expensive, productive, rented silt.
Yeah.
Am I detecting that these rotational options would be well suited to that?
So yeah, so they can apply for this standard, and they can use it in conjunction with what they've got, which means they don't necessarily have to take any land out of production. Other thing they could look at is maybe using countryside stewardship on a more rotational basis. So when you include some of the rotational options, you don't necessarily have to use them each year. So on a bad year, they might not be able to get a certain crop drilled because of the weather. They could look at doing a stewardship option and get some guaranteed income from that. The other thing that's great going forward is once the kind of sustainable farming incentive comes out in spring 2022, you can layer it on your countryside stewardship agreement as long as you're not paying for the same thing twice. So you can put the soil standard health in on top of the countryside stewardship and get paid for both.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, so moving on from the sustainable farming incentive and elms to a degree, quite a lot of press at the moment about tree planting. I think the government have pledged 30,000 hectares per year of new woodland. Perhaps we could have a chat about what opportunities are available for farmers, landowners in regards to woodland, either managing existing or creating new blocks.
Yeah, should we go down and head and look
Yeah.
at some woodland?
Let's go and have a look.
Okay.